Hi, my name is Jeff Pagano, and welcome to the Harpin On Rugby podcast. Joining me this week is someone back for cap number 47. He has his own online entity known as Post to Post Sport. Welcome back to Mr. Ciarán Duffy.
Yeah, nice to be here coming towards the end of the season. Obviously, big one next week, and then it's the business end of the URC, so it's a busy time of year, so glad to get one more cap before the end of the season.
Absolutely. Well, let's turn our attention to our feature match of the week. And here is a generic 80-word summary of how things went. Leinster crushed Ospreys 68-14 at the Aviva Stadium, driven by Joe McCarthy's hat-trick in a 10-try display. Jordan Larmour added 2 with further scores from Max Deegan, Josh van der Fleer, Jimmy O'Brien, Gary Ringrose and James Lowe. Leinster's dominant scrum, relentless line speed and sharp support play overwhelmed the visitors, securing a bonus point inside 22 minutes. Ospreys replied through Hugh Sutton and a late Dan Edwards try, but Leinster's power, pace and accuracy dictated the contest throughout. Now, obviously, we'll be going into a little bit more detail than that, and well, this was a comprehensive win for the boys in blue. We went with a strong enough lineup, had a couple of players back from injury, bit of a worry about the late withdrawal of Tommy O'Brien, but on the day, they definitely got the job done, Ciarán.
Yeah, like you said, I think Tommy O'Brien is a big player for the final and the playoffs after that. I think he's been our best player probably this season overall. But yeah, look, comprehensive, comfortable win in the end. We were well on top in the first half. I was a little bit worried towards the end of the first half, thinking, maybe we were letting Ospreys into it a little bit. I thought we could have used the score, but obviously in the end we won by I think it was 54 points or something in the end. Yeah, I'm glad we went with a strong enough team. Glad we had Robbie Henshaw back starting and fit. I'm glad, generally speaking, I think it was the right decision to go not full bore, but kind of between the last 2 weeks, we were full bore. I suppose we were kind of full bore if you combine the teams for the last 2 weeks. So I think that was the right approach. I think in the past we probably struggled a bit because we've gone kind of full cotton wool. I was writing in one of my features on Post Sport Rugby Bullets. I don't think we need to go full cotton wool. I actually thought maybe we should have played a stronger team even. Ultimately, all's well that ends well, and we got the win. I was very impressed with Joe McCarthy, and I think we could use. It'd be good if he saved a few tries for next week as well, because I think that's the first hat trick he's ever gotten. He was an absolute battering ram. In fairness, I thought Josh van der Fleer had an excellent game as well. It was a bit of an unusual substitution in the second half. He kind of got pulled for it looked like Ronan Kelleher came on for him, so I think Kelleher went to hooker and Gus McCarthy went to 7. I think McCarthy had gone to 7 for Ireland against Fiji before actually. And great to have Jordan Larmour and James Lowe back as well. So overall a really positive game, I think. And it was always a game we were likely to win, I suppose, and being 28-7 up, Ospreys didn't have anything to play for by the last 20 minutes. They kind of looked like they were already thinking about their holidays. But in fairness, I think we needed to put down a marker. It's the last home game of the season, the regular season, last game before the Champions Cup final. I think we really need to put down a marker for this one. We couldn't, if it had have ended maybe just 35-7 or 35-14 or something, maybe it would have been a bit deflating that we didn't get a few more scores. So I'm glad we kind of ran riot in the second half, as we have often done this season. Oftentimes, most of our tries, I was having a look, particularly in the Champions Cup, most of our tries have tended to come kind of between the 50 and 70 minute or 50 and 80 minute. So I was really impressed with it. I thought James Lowe, word on him, he equaled the all-time try scoring record. I think, I mean, if he hadn't have gotten that injury against England, the Six Nations, he probably would have broken it by now. Just a word on Jordan Larmour. I thought he had a great game as well, considering he hadn't played in a very long time. Really, he had. I don't know when his last game was, but he had been injured for a very long time. And in fairness to him, he looked like he was making for last time, and he looked like he was kind of putting his hand up for, look, if we need a winger for the final, if we need a winger for the playoffs, pick me. And I think he's one of those players. He had a great start to his career, and then injuries kind of caught up with him. He kind of fell out of the Ireland loop a little bit. You realise when you watch him, he's still a very talented player. And, he has a contract he signed up for next season. I think if he can stay fit, he'll be a big name for next season. Overall, impressed with how we did. Credit to Ospreys in the first half. They when they were 28-0 down, they didn't put the heads down entirely. They went and got their other try, and the game was kind of over as I imagine it's a difficult thing to play in a game like this, especially the last 20 minutes when you're, however many points down and you have nothing left to play for. You're probably hoping ref just blow it up here. Crucially as well, got second seeding. So if we win the quarter-final, and I think it is an if because it's hard to play a quarter-final the week after a Champions Cup final, we won't have to go down to South Africa. Someone in South Africa will have to come up to us. I think that's crucial as well. Week off before the final, then if we get there, and again it's a big if because I don't think any of these games will be easy. But all in all, really positive going into the final. Hopefully Tommy O'Brien's fit, and no complaints. 54-point win. You can't have too many complaints with that.
Yeah, I mean, especially after last week, we basically what we were talking about the Lions game was how after 70 minutes, we only had two tries in, but it was concerning that we're finding it so difficult to score. So when you compare that to after 70 minutes this week, we had 68 points in. It's a lot better, but I think it's not only that we improved that. I mean, I think maybe starting with Gibson Park and Harry Byrne, which is obviously going to be a halfback combination next week, had a lot to do with that. But also, not only did we have the tries, did we find the scores and have the bonus point wrapped up after 22 minutes, but the defensive standards never slipped. And I think that you look at 10 tries. I'd say you look at maybe 3-4 of them at least were actually forced by our defense, and I think that's crucial. Like there was an intercept try, but it was also we had Ospreys under so much pressure throughout that they really couldn't find ways around us. It's an amazing thing to see, and we've seen it with different combinations of Leinster 15s on the pitch. It's not just our elite team that's able to do it. They all seem to be able to slot in and stick to the system. And even if they when even teams do get it out quickly into the wide channels, we somehow seem to be able to recover. Sometimes I need to maybe freeze the telly and just count, make sure we actually do have 15. I haven't stuck an extra guy tackler onto the pitch because it's amazing to see it in action, especially when you're there at the Aviva and you see it from above. The teams try to get, teams come with an attacking strategy and they have ways of moving the ball. They like to go to certain areas of the field. They try to set things up a certain way, but when they're constantly just driven back by twin tacklers time after time after time, it's great. Now, our defense hasn't been totally great this season. We've let in too many tries, but to be hitting the straps in that area at this time of the season going into Bordeaux, it's definitely a positive. And for me, I think it was the biggest takeaway from this game, or indeed the last 2 weeks. That we've been able to, we've got this system where now obviously Bordeaux are going to be looking at ways to get around it. They're going to, Lions tried everything last week. Ospreys, different proposition. They haven't had a great season. And of course, Bordeaux are going to be a different level again, but still it's a good place to be considering how our season has gone overall. It's good to see that at least the defensive systems are in place. The second half started to look comfortable. The tries just kept coming in. The tries, it was going to go to 40 points, 50 points, 60 points. It was going to how much of a win it was going to be. There were towards the end of the game, there were like seagulls flying around the Aviva Stadium, and some would say for the Ospreys this season there were vultures circling around them, but instead we had seagulls at the Aviva. It was a sort of a surreal occasion. The results on Friday night meant any kind of a win secured second spot for Leinster. So like you said, we wanted to make a statement and we did, but that kind of took the pressure off us a little bit, and we just asserted our superiority and the fact that our season was still alive. So someone made a comment in the WhatsApp group, like we were playing with Bilbao in mind, while Ospreys were playing with our holidays in mind. So I think that kind of made a difference on the day. But I mean, I don't know if you have anything else to add and stuff, but I think we pretty much covered that game from start to finish. Elsewhere in the URC, Munster clinched the final URC playoff berth with a gritty 24-17 win over the Lions, joining Connacht, who beat Edinburgh 26-5 on Friday in the top 8 after Ulster narrowly missed out in defeat to Glasgow. One final wrinkle with the provinces is that if Ulster win the Challenge Cup in Bilbao on Friday, they take the 8th and final Champions Cup slot for next season off Connacht. But back in the URC, the Stormers slipped to third after losing 22-16 to Cardiff, and the Bulls sealed fourth by beating Benetton 45-19. In the weekend's dead rubbers, the Scarlets and Dragons drew 35-all, while the Sharks beat Zebra 54-19 in Durban. The quarterfinal lineup is now Glasgow v Connacht, Bulls v Munster, Stormers v Cardiff, and Leinster v Lions. Then on Sunday, Ireland closed their Women's Six Nations campaign with a record-setting Aviva Stadium win, running in 8 first-half tries to Maloney McDonald, O'Connor, Hogan, King, Wafer twice, and Flood. Hogan added another after the break before Scotland finally scored late through Sutcliffe. The 47-0 interval lead reflected Ireland's dominance in attack, defence, and set-piece pressure. Scott Beeman's side finished third with 3 home wins, celebrated by an also record-setting 31,000 crowd attendance for a standalone women's rugby match. But now we must return to the URC, and look, we've pretty much said all there is to say about the win over the Ospreys. So for the rest of this pod, I thought we'd try something different. We'll go quickly back maybe over Leinster's results over the 18 rounds of the URC. We'll start with the first portion of the season, and for the last few years, we were hoping to have the South African tour at any stage but the weeks right after the Six Nations, Ciarán. But in the end, it was a classic case of careful what you wish for.
Yeah, and 35-0 in the opening day of the season isn't great. I think, in a way, it was good to get the South Africa tour out of the way because, in fairness, it's not usually one where we bank on taking a whole lot of points from. 35-0 against Stormers was ridiculous, really. I mean, we just weren't at it in that game at all. We didn't perform in the slightest. I think that was the case against Munster a couple of weeks later as well. We just let the game happen rather than showing up in it. I think generally the Leinster probably played a role in that because we couldn't play a strong team, but then again, or rather, a lot of players had to be rested. I still think we had a strong enough team to not lose 35-0. The following week then was better. We obviously got to try a bonus point against Bulls, 39-31 defeat. I think we were probably unlucky not to get a losing bonus point, and in fairness, we could have actually won the game late on, and again, it just felt like things weren't really clicking for us. Next week, we had a South African team at home against Sharks, 31-5. Easy enough win in the end, comprehensive in the end. But in fairness, I think we kind of it wasn't vintage Leinster at home in the early part of the season. It wasn't great. It wasn't a great performance. It was the first win on the board though, and then obviously Croke Park against Munster was just a disastrous performance. Someone asked me, was I at Croke Park? I said no, and neither were Leinster, because in fairness, Munster were very up for the game, and we weren't. We had enough of the ball. We had enough territory to get at least a try bonus point out of that game. But one thing I think that plagued us a little bit this season is we've been very easy to read and attack at times. We've been, when Munster did defend well in that game, but in fairness, I think we made ourselves easy to defend against. Then against Zebra the next week, it's 25th of October. Bonus point win, 50-26 in the end. Jerry Caher got a try in the end, and it was good. A nice moment for him. That was Casper Gabriel, played 5 minutes of that game. His only 5 minutes of senior rugby so far. He'll probably get a little bit more, judging by all the talk I've heard about him. But in fairness, again, it was kind of one of those that was in the balance a little more than it would have been in past seasons. Zebra, they got their try bonus point. We were kind of we struggled at times, particularly in the first half. I think it was something like 26-21 or something at halftime or something like that. So the game was very much in the balance, and we weren't comfortable. And then against Dragons, well, I think this is what you call getting away with one, because at 17-10 up, Dragons were attacking us. Scott Penny should have been sent off probably for a challenge. He wasn't even shown a card in the end. Leinster stopped the Dragons on the next attack, and then RG Snyman gets a try up the other end for a bonus point win. So what probably should have been a draw and possibly even a defeat against Dragons, who in fairness didn't improve this season, ended up being a bonus point win. So that was a bit of luck that maybe we hadn't gotten. But not a lot of Leinstertainment in the first 6 games of the season. It was a pretty poor campaign, and in fairness, pretty poor opening to the campaign. I think we hadn't really clicked into gear yet. A lot of that can be put down to the internationals, Lions hangovers ahead of the um, November internationals. But at the same time, like I look at that Munster game, we did play a very strong team. That's not an excuse against them. But we probably would have been better off slowly integrating players after the Lions game rather than throwing a load of big names who hadn't played since the summer in there. But no, really poor start to the season, and based on those 6 games, it didn't look like we'd be in any finals, or maybe even it didn't even look like we would be getting a home quarter final in the URC. So yeah, disappointed way to start the season.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about the Lions is, it's like, like using that as an excuse, but literally nobody who isn't a Leinster fan will accept that as an excuse. So we might as well say it anyway. It definitely was a factor. We possibly might have expected more than a point from the South African trip, but it didn't really get much better after that. We did put away the Sharks in our first home game the following week, but then of course Munster did us over at Croke Park. We all know what happened there. But even those two matches, like you said, Zebra, I mean, we put 50 on Zebra, but we let them in for a bonus point themselves. It was a leaky defense was the issue. And the Dragons, I think it was level at halftime in that game as well. I mean, they were always in that contest. So we came out of 6 weeks. We were still around mid-table and looked a long way from getting anything out of the season. But then it came into December, and we started to have more interpros, and we started to go on a bit of a winning run, and the which included the Champions Cup. So we got a couple of wins there to start. So things were starting to look up.
Yeah, and I think the win against Ulster was a turning point. We were behind in that game for a long period of time at the Aviva. That was a 2-1. It wasn't that, but yeah, 24-20 in the end. Late comeback, I would call it. I think that was the bit of character we need to show, and then a win against away at Munster on the 27th. This was probably our best performance of the season in terms of defense. Wasn't the most fluid in attacking. Now only one try and 2 penalties won the game in the end, but defensively, like when Munster got over there for their try, or I remember they'd been attacking for about 10, 15 minutes in that phase, and they eventually got over, but we made it very difficult. And I think that was a big difference. That attack wise, we still weren't great. We got an early try, but still we made ourselves difficult to play against. We were very dominant in the scrum that game, playing against basically what was a former Leinster front row. I think the ref actually got a bit soft in the second half in that game and kind of stopped calling scrum free kicks when they should have been. But look, that was a great win, and that felt like a bit of a turning point. And then first game of 2026 against Connacht, 52-17. It wasn't as straightforward as the scoreline might suggest, because I remember Connacht were very much in the game at half time. I think they were leading 17-14, and they were probably the better team in the first half, and then we clicked into gear. Um, this is something that's kind of been a trend this season. We've tended to be better in the second half, particularly in terms of scoring tries. So, we won that game comprehensively in the end. The next week, then there were 2 European games, including a great last minute win against La Rochelle, which we all enjoyed, and then back up to the Dexcom Stadium. Big day for Connacht, opening their new stand. Great day for them. And, we safe to say we spoiled the party, and it didn't look likely for a long time, considering Connacht were the better side for a long while. I think they were unlucky not to take anything from that game, actually. But again, they were probably the better side for pretty much the opening hour of the game. Uh, and this is kind of like the elephant in the room, I suppose. Around this time was our loose head injuries, and I think we were down a few tight heads as well. So that has been a factor. It definitely has been. But won it ultimately 23-34. I remember Ciarán Frawley had a masterclass against the team he's going to now next week. Then on the 31st of January, Leinster 28, Edinburgh 20. Again, this is one we played. We obviously had a very much a second team against Edinburgh, given the Six Nations was starting the next Thursday, which I know we've all given out about enough. But I think, in fairness, it was a case of job done in the end. Edinburgh probably unlucky not to get a losing bonus point. They had a very kickable conversion at the end. which they missed, which would have gotten them a point out of that game. But no, we were behind for a good bit in that game. I think we were 8 points down at half time, which is a more significant lead than we usually, a more significant deficit that we normally have at half time. But in fairness, they they were the better side for long periods. We clicked into gear a bit in the second half. Again, it wasn't overly convincing, and then midway through the Six Nations, we played Cardiff, lost 8-7. I think that's probably the loss to look at in terms of, if we're looking at a game that meant we didn't finish, we were, we're thinking if we didn't finish top of the table this season, we did last season, what cost us finishing top? And that probably was one game that did, because, we had loads of territory, we had loads of chances. Again, we were kind of quite soft in that game, I found. People would point to a knock on laid on for Cardiff, and when they were kicking the ball out, I don't think that made a difference, because, to be honest, we'd been attacking all game. We'd been very easy to defend against. Cardiff, good value for that win. That was probably one that we let get away from us, because, in fairness, I think we were probably not the better side. We had the better of the play for a long time, and yeah, we were just very one-dimensional, very poor. Maybe to be expected midway through the Six Nations, lots of changes. I remember Charlie Tector. He came on at 10 in that game, and he got a card. So we didn't have an out-and-out fly half on the pitch. I think Jimmy O'Brien ended up playing there or something. But no, that was a disappointing loss. That was the kind of a very on Leinster defeat as well, because the side we were playing didn't have to be particularly good to beat us. So again, things were kind of looking up, but then that defeat at the end left a sour taste.
Yeah, it was interesting because that defeat came the week after Ireland's win at Twickenham, and that result, I think, switched, was a sort of a turning point in the entire season. Our Six Nations campaign didn't get off to a great start. Expectations weren't that high when we went to Twickenham, but they put on a good performance. England weren't great that day either, but of course, a lot of Leinster players involved in that, and they got a big win on the day, and of course, we turned that into a triple crown. I think that made that was significant, but in the midst of that, a few days later, for us to lose at Cardiff, in such a low-scoring game was frustrating. And then you went back over all those games. I think the Munster game was kind of an outlier. I think we went there on a mission. I think they were playing as like they'd opened tonight their Christmas dinner. They went there and they played full 80 minutes, and they were tough, and they ground it out and got that win. But all the other games, like in the Champions Cup, even when we beat Harkins, we let them get a bonus point as well. We always seemed to leaking tries. We were behind at half time. We had to recover in the second half. It wasn't we definitely didn't make things easy for ourselves. So there were concerns coming out of that. And then, of course, when we go into the final block of six, we come out of the Six Nations. We have Glasgow at Scottstown, and Glasgow were riding high at the time. They won their pool in the Champions Cup, which they had a really good seeding. They were well set for the rest of the season, and they really turned us over that day.
Yeah, in fairness, no complaints about that one. I think damage was done in the first half. I think we had already conceded the bonus point, and again in the second half we had plenty of chances. Again, we just didn't get over the line at times. It was another poor performance overall to not take anything out of that game. But Glasgow showed they were good value for their top seeding in the URC, and second seeding in the Champions Cup. Then the next week against Scarlets, again, it wasn't probably wasn't the best of performances. 6 days turnaround, it wasn't the best performances in the first half. Scarlets were probably the better team in the opening 20 minutes. Then we started to click into gear. Ultimately, bonus point win. I think Scarlets, if they had had a more full strength team, I think that game could have been a bit different. And then I think probably the best win in the league of the season was probably away to Ulster on the 17th of April after 2 rounds of European Cup action. We had kind of been disappointing at times against Edinburgh and Sales Sharks. Ultimately won those games well, but came away to Ulster. I think everyone in the Harpin On Rugby group chat was expecting, this is going to be difficult. I take a losing bonus point. ultimately we ran rampant in the first half. Um, Possible concern, well, definitely a concern that we went there in the second half, and I think we scored around the 50th minute and didn't score since then. And ultimately Ulster got 3 tries back, and we're probably unlucky not to get both a try bonus point and a losing bonus point in the end. And that was a turning point though, because I think ultimately, we all would have taken 1 or 2 points from that game, and to get all five was absolutely massive. Then the next week, well, we certainly didn't back it up away to Benetton. Obviously, the Champions Cup semi final the next week against Toulon, we played a reasonably strong team. I think we played a strong enough team to get the win. Big turning point just before half time, not getting a try. And in fairness to Benetton, they deserved it. We had the ball at 26 all in our own half. You think, kick it out, take the 2 points. Well, it would have been 3 points actually. But yeah, we didn't. Gave away a penalty. Benetton kicked that, and they were absolutely good value for their win. So a rare defeat in Italy. And then the last 2 weeks, yeah, I think like you said earlier, I think defeat the victory against Lions. We were only 14-7 up with 10 minutes to go, and I think it looked like we could actually slip up here. This could be a draw or a defeat here, because in fairness, Lions weren't great, but we were giving them an awful lot of chances. And then we turned on the style in the last 10 minutes. I think we'll kind of need 80 minutes of that last 10 minutes against Bordeaux next week, and probably in the URC quarterfinals. And then, great performance we already talked about against Ospreys, just running riot, 10 tries, exactly what we need coming into the end of the season. So I think the way the season started, I think we would have been very happy with second seeding for the playoffs.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when you look at it, we're not used to. I don't think we're used to losing as many as 6 games in an 18 game URC season. But when you consider that 6 teams beat us, but we finished ahead of 5 of them, we kind of got lucky with the way the results panned out elsewhere. We did well in our interpros. We recovered well from the Croke Park, and we swept the interpros and got the Irish Shield. So that amassed a lot of points for us as well. And to finish second was really something else. I mean, it was the same in the Champions Cup. We finished outside the top two, but we managed Toulon winning in Glasgow still gave us the home semi final. So we've been lucky in that sense, but it's just a question of going and capitalizing on it when we do get that. So definitely. Definitely a satisfying, considering especially where we were after round 4. We lost 3 of our first 4 games. So to come back and finish second really was something else. And so that just leaves the quarterfinals. We'll be playing the Lions. We'll be talking about a lot them the next couple of weeks. Just a quick maybe word on the other 3. How do you see them going?
Yeah, interesting games. I think, obviously a big ask for teams travelling down south. I think Munster have turned over teams in South Africa before against Bulls, so I don't think they'll fear going down there. Obviously, no URC next week with the Champions Cup final, so I think, Munster could go up a few days early, and just so they have that extra bit of rest, rather than going up on a Monday. But I wouldn't write them off playing against Bulls, and then that either way. And then Cardiff go to Stormers. I think the same thing. They've just beaten them, so they wouldn't write them off. I think Stormers and Bulls are favourites for those games, but I think in fairness, I wouldn't write off the opposition either. Either way, it's going to be tough for the winners of that tie to go from South Africa up to likely up to Europe for the next week if Glasgow and Leinster win. But I actually think Glasgow against Connacht is one where I could maybe see an upset. I actually think Connacht are on really good form. I think if they were at home, it would be more likely. But I wouldn't necessarily write Connacht off in that game. I do think Glasgow will pull it out of the bag. And Leinster against Lions, difficult one after a Champions Cup. I think together you get yourself up for any other game. But I think we have the squad that we will probably rotate and make changes. I'd like to see us have kind of a core group of like a squad of 33 as if it's a tournament. Notice I'm not saying World Cup because it's quarter final, but I think it would be good to have kind of a core group of players that we use now till the end of the season rather than opening up to the wider squads. So we will make changes, but I think we should have enough to get over lines at at the Aviva. So I think it's going to be Leinster against Stormers, Glasgow against Bulls. But I wouldn't be too surprised if it's Munster against Connacht either. And that would actually, ironically, for Munster, it would be a more difficult game, even though they're at home because they've had to travel up to South Africa. It's a bit of a shorter trip from Galway to Limerick than it is from South Africa to Limerick. So I actually wouldn't be surprised if that's where the upset comes. But I think we're probably looking at home wins in the four quarterfinals.
Okay, well, I think we pretty much covered all of that. We had some Facebook comments on our Facebook page. We had Cormac Mannion who said, "Hopefully, Tommy O'Brien was not started merely as a precaution. He's starting to get I'm starting to get slightly upbeat about next Saturday." And then we had Connor Cronin, his usual contributor, but he pops up on the Facebook page from time to time. He said, "Bordeaux have conceded 70 plus points over the last 2 weeks. We've scored 90 plus. Let's get out next week and be at our best." Do you agree, or would you have said the same thing a different way? Well, if you want to get involved in the conversation, just head to our Facebook page at the Full-Time Whistle after Leinster and Ireland matches and feel free to leave your thoughts. Okay, well, we're going to leave it there for now. Many thanks to Ciarán for joining us. Looking forward to have you back on again soon.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff.
And as ever, be sure to stay tuned to Harpin On Rugby on all the socials during the week, starting with our bonus chat posting on YouTube Tuesday, where we'll be harping on Leinster's possible 23 for Bilbao. Then our 80 plus column, where we try to look at the wider rugby world, and that post every Wednesday over on Substack. In the meantime, stay safe, everyone. Slán.